Erebor stood in the chaos, her heart pounding as agents cuffed Big T and dragged him away, his face twisted in fury. Akpe, pinned to the floor by Orwecho, cursed and struggled, but there was no escape. Erebor's eyes burned with tears. Justice had come, but at a cost she could feel in her bones. The rescued girls, Titi, Ngorzi, and others, huddled together in a corner, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Some cried softly, others stared blankly, as if their souls had drifted far away. Erebor moved to them, kneeling, her voice gentle. "You're safe now. No one will hurt you again." But the words felt thin against the weight of their pain. Orwecho approached, his face tight with exhaustion. "Naptip is coming. They'll take the girls' Ebo. They'll get help. They'll heal." Erebor nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe. The following morning, Naptip officials arrived, their faces calm but firm. They spoke to each girl gently, asking names, taking notes, offering water and blankets. The girls were hesitant at first, flinching when touched, but the soft voices of the counselors, the warmth of the care workers, began to soften the edges of their fear. Erebor watched as the girls were guided into waiting buses, small, tired figures carrying stories too heavy for their young shoulders. Titi clutched Erebor's hand before stepping in. "Thank you," she whispered, tears brimming. Erebor hugged her tightly, whispering back, "Find your voice, Titi. Don't let them take it from you." Orwecho stood beside Erebor, his gaze heavy with understanding. "Naptip will reorient them. They'll get counseling, medical care, and skills training. They'll be reintegrated back into the society when they're ready." Erebor nodded, her heart swelling with bittersweet relief. This wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. In the quiet that followed, Erebor returned to her small room. It felt emptier now, filled with the ghosts of laughter and whispers, of dreams stolen and lives scarred. She sat on her bed, clutching Erhi's journal, her tears falling freely. "I did it, Erhi," she whispered into the silence. "I did it for you." But the pain lingered, sharp, persistent. Erebor knew she would never forget the faces of the girls, the fear in their eyes, the sound of Big T's voice as he ordered Erhi's death. The ache was a weight she would carry always, but she also felt something else, a flicker of hope, fragile but alive. Orwecho visited that evening, bringing food and quiet company. They sat in the fading light, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Orwecho spoke, his voice low. "You've done something most people would never dare. But this fight, it's bigger than just one ring. There are others, Erebor, hidden in plain sight." Erebor nodded slowly, her eyes hardening. "Then we find them, all of them." Days later, Erebor sat under the shade of a tree, pen in hand, writing a letter to Mama. Her words were careful, tender, but laced with truth. She told Mama everything, about Erhi, about the men who stole her away, about the pain and the battle that followed. But she also wrote about the girls rescued, about the hope that now burned brighter because of what they had done. Tears splattered the page as she wrote, "Mama, I couldn't save Erhi, but I've saved others. I carry her name, her dreams, but I will also carry my own. I will keep fighting, for her, for all of them. Please forgive me for not telling you sooner. I wanted to protect you, but now I want you to know, your daughter did not die in vain." She folded the letter, sealing it with trembling hands. The fight was far from over, but her heart felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Erebor stood by the river's edge as the sun set, the water glistening like liquid gold. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying her sister's name. She closed her eyes, clutching Erhi's necklace, and whispered, "I promise, Erhi, I will not stop. For every girl they tried to break, for every voice they tried to silence, I will fight." Beside her, Orwecho stood silent, the weight of their shared battle resting between them. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, that the monsters they had faced were only part of a much larger darkness. But in that moment, they stood firm, unbroken, ready. The fight for justice, for freedom, for the stolen dreams of girls like Erhi was just beginning. The days after the raid felt like a strange dream. The once busy club lay abandoned, a silent monument to the pain it had hidden for so long. The air smelled of dust and spilled drinks, but the echoes of the past were louder. The music, the whispers, the screams. Erber walked past the broken chairs, her footsteps hollow. She stood on the stage where she had once sung, staring at the spot where Big T used to sit. It was over, at least for now. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was filled with the weight of what had been lost. Erhi's life, the innocence of so many girls, the years stolen by greed and cruelty. Erber felt it all pressing down on her chest, and she wept silently, letting the tears soak into the dusty floor. She whispered into the emptiness, "I did it, Erhi. I did it for you." Naptip shelter was filled with quiet sobs and haunted eyes. The girls who had been rescued sat in circles, counselors gently guiding them through the darkness they carried. Titi clung to Erber when she visited, her voice small and trembling. "How do we forget, Erber? How do we start again?" Erber didn't have an answer, because she was still trying to find her own. She watched as the counselors taught the girls basic skills: sewing, hairdressing, catering, small steps toward rebuilding lives shattered by betrayal. But she knew it would take more than classes to heal the wounds they carried. Erber sat with them listening, holding hands, crying when they cried. She wasn't just a visitor. She was one of them, their pain mirrored in her own heart. And each time she left the shelter, she whispered a silent prayer for strength, for the courage to keep going. Weeks later, Erber finally returned to Otukpo. The journey felt long, the roads familiar but strange after all that had happened. Mama's eyes filled with tears when she saw her, arms pulling her into a tight embrace. "My child," Mama whispered, her voice shaking. "I feared I would never see you again." Erber knelt at Erhi's grave, her fingers tracing the simple wooden cross. The air was still, the sky a quiet blue. She spoke softly, as if her sister could hear. "Erhi, I carried your name, your pain. But I'm ready to carry my own now. I will never forget you." Mama sat beside her, the silence between them heavy but warm. Erber shared her story. Every dark detail, every risk, every moment she thought she wouldn't make it out. Mama wept quietly, but she also nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "You are stronger than I could have ever imagined, my child." Erber couldn't rest. The faces of the rescued girls haunted her dreams. Their fear, their brokenness, their longing for something better. She realized she couldn't stop at Erhi's story. There were more girls, more stories, more battles to fight. With Orwecho's help, she reached out to the local women's groups, the churches, even the schools. They started small meetings, talking openly about the dangers of trafficking, about the lies of men like Akpe and Big T, and the traps set in the name of fame and fortune. Erber shared her story, raw and unfiltered, her voice shaking but steady. Mothers wept, fathers clenched their fists, and young girls listened, wide-eyed and afraid, but also empowered. It was the beginning of a new mission, one Erber knew she couldn't walk away from. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. One evening, as Erber stood by the riverbank in Otukpo, the sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson. She closed her eyes, feeling the breeze on her skin, the ache in her chest softening for the first time in months. Orwecho joined her, his presence quiet and grounding. "You've come far, Erber," he said softly. Erber nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "But there's still so much to do. So many voices still trapped in silence." Orwecho looked at her with quiet admiration. "We'll fight together. For them. For Erhi." As the sun dipped low, Erber raised her head high, the necklace around her neck glinting in the fading light. Her heart still hurt, yes, but it also burned with a purpose bigger than herself. And she knew, as long as she had breath, she would carry the torch. For Erhi, for Titi, for Ngorzi, for every girl who had been told she was nothing. Her voice would echo through the darkness, until every hidden hand was exposed, and every girl could walk free. The courtroom in McCordy was packed, the air heavy with tension. Erber sat quietly, her heart pounding as she watched Big T, Akpeas and other surviving men shuffle into the dock. Their faces hard, but their eyes hollow. The judge's voice rang out firm and clear, reading out the charges: trafficking, drug smuggling, conspiracy to exploit minors, manslaughter. Each word felt like a knife cutting through the lies they had told for years. Erber gripped Erhi's necklace, tears brimming as the gavel came down. Life sentences. The murmurs in the room grew louder, some in shock, others in relief. Erber wept silently, tears of sorrow for Erhi, for the lives lost, but also of quiet victory. Justice, at long last, had spoken. Outside, the rescued girls watched from a distance, some crying, others holding hands. Titi turned to Erber, whispering, "They can't hurt us anymore." Erber knew it wasn't the end of the war, but it was a battle won. And as the news spread through Bainway, she felt a seed of change begin to take root. After the sentencing, Erber felt a restless pull in her heart. She had seen too much pain, too many lives destroyed by lies and greed. She couldn't just walk away. Sitting with Orwecho one evening, she spoke her dream aloud. "We need to do more, Orwecho. We can't wait for the next Erhi to be taken. We must act before it's too late." Orwecho nodded slowly. "What do you have in mind?" And so, the Erhi Foundation was born. A safe space for vulnerable girls, a place for healing, for learning, for starting over. Erber poured her heart into it, gathering volunteers, counselors, and even working with NAPTIP to train survivors as peer educators. The foundation also partnered with NDLEA to create awareness programs in schools and churches across Bainway. They ran workshops, sensitization rallies, and even helped law enforcement track suspicious activity. Girls going missing, strange recruitment agents promising opportunities that smelled too much like traps. The mission was clear: stop the cycle, save the girls, heal the wounds. The Erhi Foundation grew slowly but surely, becoming a beacon of hope in Bainway State. Erber watched as Titi and the other survivors found their voices again, singing, learning, laughing. There were setbacks, of course. Nights when some girls cried themselves to sleep, haunted by memories that wouldn't let go. But there were victories too. Titi teaching a group of younger girls how to braid hair, Ngorzi leading a dance class, others learning tailoring and catering. Erber worked tirelessly, traveling across villages to speak with parents, warning them of the dangers lurking in promises of fame and fortune. She spoke at churches, in markets, even at bus stops, anywhere she could find ears willing to listen. Her voice, once quiet and uncertain, had become a force, steady, fierce, and full of purpose. One evening, as she watched the girls practice a dance routine, Erber whispered to Orwecho, "This is what Erhi wanted, a life of meaning, of helping others rise." And for the first time in months, she felt her heart lighten. But darkness has a way of lingering. Rumors began to stir. New faces, new recruiters, whispers of another ring operating under the radar. Erber felt a cold knot in her chest, the old fear returning. She sat with Orwecho late into the night, planning. "We can't let this happen again. We have to go deeper. We need the agencies. NDLEA, NAPTIP, the police. They have to see what we see." Orwecho agreed, his face hardening. "We'll go to Abuja if we have to. We'll make them listen." Erber nodded, her resolve burning. "For Erhi, for every girl still trapped, we'll fight until they're free." And so, They prepared for the next phase, gathering evidence, building networks, and strengthening their partnership with the authorities. The battle wasn't over. It had only shifted. One crisp morning, Ebo stood before a packed hall in McCourty, a community awareness event hosted by the Erhi Foundation. She took the microphone, her heart full, her voice steady. "My name is Erba. I am not just a sister to Erhi. I am a sister to every girl whose voice was stolen. We cannot close our eyes. We cannot pretend it's not happening. Together, we must fight trafficking. We must fight drug abuse. We must fight for the future of our daughters." The crowd erupted in applause, tears glistening in many eyes. Mama, sitting in the front row, wiped her tears, pride shining through her grief. Erber closed her speech with a quiet prayer. For Erhi, for the girls, for the future. As the people dispersed, a woman approached Erber, her eyes wide with gratitude. "My daughter almost followed them, but your story saved her." Erber's heart swelled, and she knew the flame was burning brighter than ever, and she would keep it alive, no matter how long it took. Erber sat in her small office at the Erhi Foundation, surrounded by files, flyers, and piles of reports. Her phone buzzed nonstop, calls from mothers, schools, even market women, all reaching out for help. The work was overwhelming, but Erber refused to rest. Each voice was a reminder that the fight wasn't over. Late one evening, as Erber locked up the foundation's gates, a figure lingered across the road. His face was hidden, but his posture was too familiar, confident, cold, watching. A shiver ran down Erber's spine. Orwecho had warned her. Traffickers don't vanish. They regroup. The next day, TT burst into Erber's office, her voice shaking. "Erber, I heard whispers. A new man has come. They call him Mr. B. He's making promises, offering money to girls again. It's happening all over." Erber's heart clenched. She knew this fight wasn't done. A new predator had stepped into the void left by Big T and Akpe, and he was already weaving his web. Erber's resolve hardened. She would not let another girl be taken. Erber and Orwecho sat down with NDLEA and NAPTIP officials, including the police, laying out the reports, the whispers, the patterns. The agencies listened, but their resources were stretched thin. "We'll do what we can," an agent said, "but we need more evidence." Erber clenched her fists. She knew she couldn't just wait for help. The Erhi Foundation began hosting more workshops, training girls to spot the signs of trafficking, teaching families to recognize the traps. She spoke at schools, warning teenagers about smooth-talking recruiters, false auditions, and fake modeling offers. But the shadows were creeping in faster. Reports of missing girls surfaced. 2 from Otukpa, 1 from Boko. Erber felt the weight of each name like a stone on her chest. The storm was gathering, and she had to move quickly before the darkness swallowed another girl whole. One evening, an envelope arrived at the foundation. Inside was a torn photograph, Erhi standing with Akpe and a man she didn't recognize. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "It's not over." Erber's hands trembled. She showed the photo to Orwecho, and he frowned deeply. That man, that could be Mr. B. They stared at the picture, realizing the danger was closer than they thought. "This is a warning," Orwecho said. "They know we're still a threat." Erber clenched her jaw. "Then let them know I'm not backing down." Erber stood before a packed hall at a community event, her voice strong and clear. "They thought they could silence us. They thought they could hide behind lies. But we are here. We are watching. And we will fight for every girl, every voice, every dream they tried to steal." The crowd erupted in applause. Young girls hugged their mothers tightly. Fathers nodded in solemn agreement. And survivors like TT stood taller, their eyes burning with hope. As the sun set over McCourty, Erber knew the road ahead was long, but she was ready. The fire that had started with Erhi's voice now blazed through her, through the girls, through the community. And together, they would burn down the darkness. One story, one girl, one victory at a time. Erber walked through the market one bright afternoon, the familiar sense of roasted maize and fried akara filling the air. But as she browsed, she felt it again. That prickle at the back of her neck, the weight of unseen eyes watching her. She turned sharply, scanning the crowd, but the faces melted into the noise. Still, the feeling lingered. She wasn't imagining it. She was being watched. Later that night, a note was slipped under the foundation's door. Scrawled in blocky handwriting, it read, "Leave the past buried, or you'll join your sister." Erber's hands shook as she read the message, but her resolve only strengthened. She showed it to Orwecho, who nodded grimly. "They know you're a threat, Erber, but that also means they're afraid. We can use that." Together, they began mapping out Mr. B's suspected network, using whispers from survivors, Titi's memory of shady men, and even leads from market women who had seen new faces hanging around bus stops, offering opportunities. The hunt had begun, but the game was dangerous. The pressure weighed heavy on Erber. The foundation was growing, but so were the threats. Erber sat alone one evening, staring at a picture of Erhi, her heart aching. The burden felt too heavy sometimes, the grief too sharp. She longed for peace, for quiet. But every time she thought of the girls still out there, trapped and voiceless, her resolve returned. She picked up her phone and called Orwecho. "We keep going," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. No matter what, Titi approached Erber one afternoon, her eyes bright but her voice nervous. "I want to help more than just hear. I want to speak, to tell my story. Maybe if people hear what they did to us, they'll fight harder." Erber felt a swell of pride and sorrow. She hugged Titi tightly. "You are so brave." At the next community gathering, Titi stood beside Erber, her hands shaking but her voice clear. She spoke of false promises, of nights filled with fear, of girls lost forever, and of the day the Erhi Foundation and the agencies came to save them. The crowd listened, tears streaming down faces, some mothers weeping openly, clutching their daughters close. Erber's heart soared. The power of storytelling was changing lives, one voice at a time. Through whispered tips, Erber and Orwecho traced a pattern. Mr. B was operating from a small guest house on the outskirts of McCourty, using it as a cover for his recruitment network. Young girls were seen entering but rarely leaving. They gathered their evidence carefully, recordings, photos, testimonies. Erber knew the risks. If Mr. B found out, she could be his next target. But she also knew this was her moment. The fight was not over, but she would not face it alone. She had her family, her community, her team, and the memory of Erhi burning bright in her heart. The days grew long, and the weight of the mission settled on Erber's shoulders. The Erhi Foundation's work continued, rescuing, rehabilitating, rebuilding, but the fight felt endless. Mr. B had vanished, slipping through their fingers like smoke. Ebo stared at the map pinned to her wall, the red markers spreading like a stain across Bainway. One evening, Orwecho sat beside her in the dim office light. "We've done what we can, Erber. We've shaken them, exposed them. But there's more, always more." Erber nodded, her voice quiet but fierce. "Then we don't stop. We adapt. We grow. We keep going. For Erhi and every girl they tried to silence." Erber stood before the girls at the shelter, their eyes wide and hopeful but also haunted. She saw Erhi in each of their faces, the dreams stolen, the trust broken. Titi asked one day, "Will it ever end, Auntie Erber? Will they stop coming for us?" Erber swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat. She stood before Titi, taking her hands. "I don't know when, Titi, but I know we'll fight until they do. We'll fight with our stories, with the law, with our voices. And we won't stop. The girls nodded slowly, a flicker of courage in their eyes. But Erber knew. The scars would remain, hidden beneath their smiles. And yet, those scars were also their strength. A reminder of what they had survived. Months passed, and the Erhi Foundation expanded. New centers in Otukpo, Boko, Otukpa, and Katsinoala. Igbo trained volunteers, worked with NAPDIP, and partnered with the NDLEA for community sensitization campaigns. They visited markets, bus stations, and schools, anywhere young girls gathered. The message was clear: beware, be wise, protect your future. One evening, standing before a crowd at a community event, she said, "This is not just my fight. It's not just Erhi's story. It's ours. If we stay silent, we let them win. We must fight together. Families, churches, schools, government. The traffickers are watching. They're counting on our silence. Let's prove them wrong." Erber's story reached the ears of politicians, activists, and journalists. Her voice grew louder, a beacon in the darkness. She called for stricter laws, for more funding for NAPDIP and NDLEA, for better education in rural areas, for real consequences for traffickers. Human trafficking is not just a crime, it's a disease eating our society, she told a panel at the State House of Assembly in McCordy. Drugs fuel this evil, and our children are paying the price. We cannot leave this battle to a few agencies. Every arm of government must act. Every community must rise. Every parent must be vigilant. Her words stirred hearts, but she knew speeches weren't enough. The real change lay in action. Day by day, case by case, voice by voice. Erber stood under the mango tree in Otukpo, the breeze gentle on her face, Erhi's necklace glinting softly. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the journey. Erhi's loss, the battles fought, the victories won, and the shadows still lurking. Mama sat beside her, a quiet strength in her presence. Orwecho approached, holding a folder. New reports, new names, new threats. Erber opened her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Let's keep going." The fight against drugs and human trafficking wasn't over. It was a storm that raged on, claiming new victims every day. The battle was not over. The shadows of drugs and trafficking still lingered in the corners of the cities and villages, hidden behind promises of quick fame, easy money, and false dreams. Erber knew this. Orwecho knew this. Even the girls who had been rescued carried the scars. A reminder that evil, when left unchecked, thrives in silence. Every day, a new story whispered its way into Erber's heart. Another missing girl, another mother's tears, another life lost to the chains of exploitation. The fight wasn't just Erber's. It wasn't just the Erhi Foundation's. It belonged to all of us. Communities, families, governments, and agencies alike. This evil, the evil of drugs and human trafficking, wasn't just a crime against individuals. It was a theft of futures, a robbery of innocence, a destruction of the very fabric of society. It tore apart families, fueled addiction, and bred cycles of pain that rippled across generations. To the girls who had been taken, know this: you are not forgotten. Your stories will be told. Your voices will rise. To the mothers and fathers, watch over your children. Listen closely, ask questions, and never let the promise of quick success blind you to danger. To the government, the battle is too big for one voice. It needs your strength, your policies, your protection. Strengthen the laws, enforce them, support the survivors, and tear down the networks that thrive in your lands. And to the traffickers, the pushers, the deceivers, know this: the light is coming for you. You may hide in shadows for a time, but the voices of the broken will rise. Justice may be slow, but it is steady. The battle continues. The war is not yet won, but the fire is burning. and it will not go out. As long as people like Erber or Weicho and the countless survivors stood tall, the light would never fully go out. This story is not just a tale, it's a call. A call to every government agency, every law enforcement officer, every teacher, every parent, every community. Stand up, fight back. Don't let the traffickers win. Don't let drugs steal another life. The battle is far from over, but together we can write a new story. For Erhi, for every girl, for the soul of our society. Together we must fight. For Erhi, for the girls, for the future of our communities.